Listen, we need to talk. We know people rag on Canada, okay? Don't think we don't know what you say about us. Make fun of our accents, mock our politeness, question our food choices. We can never catch a break. We can't even develop a proper film industry. All of our best talent packs up and heads south. I mean, most people aren't even sure what constitutes Canadian cinema. Does it have to be shot here, set here, starring and directed by Canadians? Well, I'll let you in on a little secret. Canadian cinema is simply cinema made by Canadians. That's it. And it's time we start getting the respect that we deserve, because this next list shows you what happens when Canadians stop being polite. At number 6 comes the classic Prom Night, shot in Toronto and directed by Canadian Paul Lynch. A group of overly eager kids accidentally kill their friend after forcing her through an open window and she falls to her death. Not understanding how the prison system works, they decide to keep it a secret, swearing amongst themselves not to tell a soul for the rest of their lives. Well, 6 years later, it's Prom Night, and those same kids are getting ready for a night they'll never forget. But the past can't stay hidden for long, and they each start getting eerie phone calls. This movie also deserves to be on this list for the disco music alone. You've also got the incomparable Jamie Lee Curtis, and it doesn't get more quintessentially horror than the Scream Queen herself. At times it can be cheesy, and the first proper kill isn't until the last half hour. It's not particularly scary or cinematically engaging, but it paved the way for slashers that came after it. Think of it as the genre learning how to walk. Prom Night walked so Halloween could run. And it's interesting to see how early slashers began to create the conventions and tropes we'd grow to love, so for that alone, you should check it out. For number 5, we're going to take a trip to the dark side. I mean, the French-Canadian side. Quebec has its own distinct film industry, and over the years it's churned out some classics. One of them being 7 Jours du Talion, based on Patrick Sénécal's novel of the same name. If you've never heard of Sénécal, he's basically the French Stephen King. This is a film that plays into every parent's worst nightmare. After his 8-year-old daughter is brutally raped and murdered, Bruno Hamel decides to take the law into his own hands. He kidnaps her murderer, and for 7 days he tortures him with precision only his years as a surgeon can afford him. Every day brings about a new and original form of abuse and torment. However, as the days go by, Bruno becomes increasingly disillusioned, and the film begs a lot of existential questions about revenge, justice, morality. What would a normally pragmatic person do when plagued by grief and guilt? How far would you go for your children? Is there anything you wouldn't do for them? Though this film isn't scary in the sense of poltergeists or slashers, it offers an even more horrifying perspective. It showcases the depravity that humans are capable of inflicting on one another, and the true horror for Bruno lies in the fact that no matter what he does to his captive, it won't bring his daughter back. So if you want to see some heartbreaking acting and some moody visuals, check out our number 5 pick. Staying on the Quebec side, number 4 goes to a film that doesn't get nearly as much recognition as it should. 5150 Rue des Ormes. Also based on a Patrick Sénécal novel, this film is a must-see. It's no secret that most films don't do justice to their literary counterpart, but this is a fantastic adaptation. 5150 follows Yannick, who goes out for a bike ride and takes a nasty spill trying to avoid hitting a black cat. He looks for help at a nearby house in order to clean up his bloody hand, but unluckily ends up on the doorstep of Jacques Beaulieu, a man with a little too much time on his hands. Yannick gets a little too curious and wanders into the home. He hears screaming and discovers one of Jacques' victims. Jacques keeps Yannick hostage, and unfortunately for him, the old man's wife is loyal to a fault and his daughters prove to be no help either. So our protagonist's chances of escape are slim to none. Until Jacques gives him a potential way out. Beat me at chess and I'll let you go. Queen's Gambit fans rejoice. The acting is brilliant, the characters are developed in a realistic way, and the suspense will keep you captivated. Go check it out. Coming in at number 3, we've got Gingersnaps, starring Canadian icon Catherine Isabelle and set in a small town in Ontario. This movie is bloody, funny, and filled with teen angst. When outcast Ginger gets her period for the first time, things start to get a little complicated, and it doesn't involve which tampons she needs to buy. After an encounter with a lycanthrope, Ginger develops the urge to kill. This is pretty much the OG Jennifer's Body. I mean, it's impossible to watch it and not see the similarities. A teenage girl gets viciously attacked and acquires a taste for blood. That iconic hallway strut, it's all there. And by no means am I trying to pit them against each other, they're both amazing. But one of them came first. and happens to be Canadian. So go watch it. It's dark, it's sexy, it gets you to question the dynamics in women's relationships and the way girls are treated once they turn a certain age. It's a killer good time. Number 2 goes to My Bloody Valentine, shot and set in a coal mining town in Nova Scotia and directed by Canadian George Mialka. This movie is probably the most blatantly Canadian one on this list. I mean, Moosehead beer flows freely, Canadian tuxedos abound, and there's enough Canadian raising to make a fuss about. So there's no question about whether or not this is a Canadian horror movie. And it's a classic. One year on Valentine's Day, a group of coal miners get trapped in the mine after their dumb supervisors decide to take off for the party. Choosing to eat his co-workers, Harry Warden is the only survivor. He's been left traumatized and is sent to a psychiatric facility. He obviously escapes and decides to enact revenge on his supervisors and swears to kill anyone who celebrates Valentine's Day ever again. I think someone's a little angry because he's single. 20 years go by and folks want to get rowdy again, but after a heart shows up in a candy box, the Valentine's Day dance is cancelled. The young folks do what they do best and they throw a secret party of their own. Well, we all know how that's gonna turn out. The movie's super fun to watch, the killer has an unforgettable look, and for those expecting some romance, there's a love triangle. It's also apparently one of Quentin Tarantino's favorite slashers. So next Valentine's Day, ditch the rom-coms and turn this on instead. And our number 1 spot has to go to the seminal holiday horror flick, Black Christmas. Considered to be the granddaddy of slashers, it came out in '74 and paved the way for so many classics that came after it. Shot in Toronto and inspired by a series of murders that took place in Montreal, the film follows a group of sorority girls that get plucked off one by a faceless killer. Watching it 50 years later, it feels ahead of its time, and it's not hard to see how it influenced a lot of our favorites. It's got everything we love. Creepy phone calls coming from inside the house, a guy in a hockey mask. Even John Saxon, who plays Nancy's dad in Nightmare on Elm Street, plays a cop in this movie. If all of that wasn't enough, John Carpenter famously took influence from this movie when coming up with the idea for Halloween. Suffice it to say, this Canadian classic should be on your list if you haven't already watched it. So those are our top 6 Canadian horror movies. If you like them, please comment down below, hit that like button, subscribe, and let us know what you want to see. See you next time.